I would now like to declare the 81st Ordinary Annual General Meeting of the Racehorse Owners Association officially open. Thank you all for joining us today at Doncaster Racecourse. I'm Louise Norman and I am the Chief Executive of the Racehorse Owners Association. And the RO, on behalf of the board and the team, we welcome you all here today. The meeting will begin with the formal AGM, which we followed by the President's speech, and then we will dedicate the remainder of the formal meeting to answer questions from those received ahead of the AGM and also from in the room. I'm also delighted that key industry colleagues from the BHA, Levy Board, Horse Welfare Board and the People Board will be presenting to you this afternoon on conclusion of this AGM. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will now move on swiftly to the official procedures of the meeting and the resolutions to be approved. The notice of this meeting and convening this meeting is set out on page 3 of the annual report, which has been circulated to all members. For the purposes of this meeting, it is taken as read. We will deal with the items set out in the annual report under notice of meeting. As in previous years and in accordance with the best corporate practice, I will announce the proxy vote after each resolution. I would also like to remind you that in accordance with the ROA's Articles of Association, 5 of today's resolutions are ordinary resolutions and simply require a majority vote, and 1 is a special resolution, which requires 75% of the vote. So moving on. Resolution A, to receive and approve by way of ordinary resolution the nominations of the board for President, Dr. Jim Walker, and Vice President, Alan Spence. We will now conduct a vote in the room. Please raise your hands if you are in favour of Resolution A. Thank you. Now please raise your hands if you are against Resolution A. Thank you. We have received 268 proxy forms supporting Resolution A and 14 against. Based on the votes in the room and the proxy forms received, I declare the resolution carried. Moving forward to Resolution B, to receive and approve by way of ordinary resolution the co-option of Dan Abraham as appointed director to the board, we will now conduct a vote in the room. Please, can you raise your hands if you are in favour of Resolution B? Thank you. Now, please raise your hands if you are against Resolution B. Thank you. So we have received 259 proxy forms supporting Resolution B and 23 against. Based on the votes in the room and the proxy forms received, I declare the resolution carried. Resolution C, to receive and approve by way of ordinary resolution the results of the election to fill vacancies on the board. We will now conduct a vote in the room. Please raise your hands if you are in favour of Resolution C. Thank you. Now please raise your hands if you are against Resolution C. Thank you. So we have received 278 proxy forms supporting Resolution C and 4 against. Based on the votes in the room and the proxy forms received, I declare the resolution carried, and namely the appointment of Mark Johnston, Peter Saville and Sam Hoskins to the ROA board. Welcome. Thank you to all of the candidates who stood this year and to all members who voted, which has resulted in our highest engagement since 2010. Moving on to Resolution D, to confirm and adopt by way of ordinary resolution the report and the financial statements for the year ended the 31st of March 25. We will now conduct a vote in the room. Please raise your hands if you are in favour of Resolution D. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you are against Resolution D. Thank you. We have received 277 proxy forms supporting Resolution D and 5 against. Based on the votes in the room and the proxy forms received, I declare the resolution carried. Resolution E. To appoint by way of ordinary resolution RSM UK Audit LLP as auditors in accordance with section 485/2 of the Companies Act 2006. We will now conduct a vote in the room. Please raise your hands if you are in favour of Resolution E. Thank you. Please now raise your hands if you are against Resolution E. Thank you. We've received 277 proxy forms supporting Resolution E and 5 against. Based on the votes in the room and the proxy forms received, I declare the resolution carried. Resolution F. To approve by way of special resolution that with effect from the conclusion of this meeting, the draft Articles of Association produced to the meeting and made available be adopted as the Articles of Association for the company in substitution for and to the exclusion of the company's existing Articles of Association. We will now conduct a vote in the room. Please raise your hands if you are in favour of Resolution F. Thank you. Please raise your hands if you are against Resolution F. Thank you. We've received 259 proxy forms supporting Resolution F and 23 against. Based on the votes and in the room and the proxy forms received, I declare the resolution carried. And that concludes the formal part of the meeting. But we also mark the end of the terms for Khalid Almadaf, Sir Philip Davis, Celia Djanovic and Mouse Hamilton Farley. I would sincerely like to thank each of them for their knowledge, energy, passion and time. They have supported the ROA throughout their terms, not only seeing the strategic direction set, but also driving the business forward. They have collectively provided key insights that have helped inform the work of the ROA and have been passionate throughout, alongside the activities that have been undertaken. Thank you very much on behalf of the ROA, and I know that we will continue to stay in touch. I would also like to take this opportunity to personally thank Charlie Parker for his unwavering support as the ROA president. And whilst there have undoubtedly been challenges, the amount of enthusiasm, time and passion that he has given has often been undervalued and unrecognised. Having seen and experienced firsthand the challenges across the sport, it has not been easy to navigate. But with the changing landscape, I look forward to continuing the ROA work as we support the delivery of the industry governance changes and critical owners work stream, focusing on tackling the key issues across prize money, costs and experience. I would now like to invite Charlie as your outgoing president to address the meeting one last time. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to those who have joined us here at Doncaster Racecourse, and also to members who will be catching up online later. I'm now going to repeat a bit of what Louise has said. I would like to start by thanking Sir Philip Davis, who decided not to stand again after serving his 4-year term. Philip provided the board with valuable political and strategic advice during his time. I would also like to thank Khalid, who has served as a co-opted board member for a 4-year term, providing the board with some very useful insights into ownership experiences whilst living in the Middle East. And also a huge thanks to Mouse and to Celia, both of whom have served their terms with huge enthusiasm and hard work, especially in the critical areas of retraining of racehorses and the equine welfare group. The board have taken the opportunity to co-opt Dan Abraham, who's here with us today. Dan is currently chair of the Racehorse Syndicators Association And with the ever-increasing involvement in ownership through partnerships, syndicates and micro-ownerships, Dan's appointment will further strengthen the association's representation from those crucial areas of ownership. And finally, I'd like to congratulate the newly elected directors, Mark Johnson, Peter Saville and Sam Hoskins, all of whom bring a wealth of experience across all aspects of the racing landscape. This is my last statement as president of the ROA after 5 years. When I succeeded Nick Cooper in June 2020, the country was in the midst of a full national lockdown. The industry came together and managed to get racing back before any other national sport. Indeed, we were the first to allow limited attendance by owners and then subsequently spectators. We also managed to approach the government COVID Sports Fund, which provided the levy board with funding to further help the sport, as well as providing capital funding for racecourses. This was a high point of cooperation and a signal as to what can be achieved. There have been other examples. The original change to the governance structure of the sport in 2022, which removed the paralysing veto and presented an opportunity to grow the sport as the country emerged from lockdown. And recently, the work done on the proposed tax hike, which saw the Axe the Tax campaign cut through into unprecedented mainstream media coverage, the results of which we shall see at the end of next month. As you may have guessed, there is a but coming. Despite excellent work on the development of Project PACE, again by a cross-industry group, including the main rights holders, we seem to have run aground. The last working group meeting signed off the project at the beginning of June of this year, and as of today, the next round of meetings has not yet been arranged. PACE highlighted the opportunities that a revamped elite flat racing product could have on fan engagement and on global media and commercial investment. Recent modelling of a steady state, do-nothing industry shows a potential decline in actual prize money of over the next 10 years of £45 million. Coordinated approach to the sale of rights and a turbocharged digital marketing effort can stop this decline. The need for new investment into the industry is critical for our future. However, exciting and compelling collaborative work seems to inevitably crash upon the barrier of self-interest, not invented here, or just too difficult. The industry must deliver a version of PACE as a priority. The governance structure adopted in 2022 is simple in terms of the BHA, the Commercial Committee, and its shareholders, and it should work. However, there are so many other hurdles that are presented, not least the funding path through the Levy Board and the Racing Foundation. When representatives change hats and views depending on what room they are sitting in, it makes for stagnation and puts a handbrake on strategic initiatives which we so sorely need. As an industry, we have not yet embraced the digital world. We remain rooted in the analog age as Gen Z moves on over the hill. The insights provided by Project Beacon are both compelling and actionable, but without full support and funding, it could be destined to be yet another report that will join its predecessors, such as Enable, in a very large dusty cupboard in the BHA offices. I want to stress that from experience, there has been some superb work done in very difficult circumstances. However, it does feel when it comes to putting the ball in the back of the net, the industry freezes. We have appointed Charles Allen as the new chair. He brings commercial acumen and political influence. I hope he can carry out his vision of using the BHA as a facilitator to a bright commercial future with new investment. It's a difficult job, and I wish him luck. Whilst looking at the BHA itself, the cost of running the sport has spiralled over the last 7 years. Whilst inflation has accounted for a large chunk of it, a big proportion has come from tackling a number of new tasks. But we need to prioritise those areas that can legitimately be considered to add value and contribute to growth, while at the same time maintaining our regulation as best in class. There has to be a clearer accountability around projects and initiatives. We need a fit-for-purpose operating system that can make use of the huge amounts of data that we have within the industry. It is a serious failing that a sport that is so intrinsically linked to race and horse data is so bereft when it comes to understanding our investors, owners, and customers. With the removal of the member-nominated directors from the BHA board, it will be critical that the shareholders, of which the ROA is one, are able to hold to account the actions and functions of the new look BHA. Turning to why we are here this morning and our role as the representative body of all owners, the recent survey, to which we had over 1,400 responses from across all owners, not just ROA members, has highlighted some critical issues. There is a real risk of losing a significant number of owners from the sport, with 47% of respondents stating that they will be looking to reduce their activity over the next 3 to 5 years, and only 6% stating they would look to increase their level of investment. This is seriously concerning against a backdrop of declining owner numbers over the last 5 years. Owners contribute $550 million per annum into the industry, an investment that excludes the capital cost of the horse, which is normally written off. This is the biggest investment into racing, far outweighing betting, sponsorship. Included in that £550 million figure is 9.6 million that is contributed to the BHA operational budget. This is actually £1 million more than the net contribution from racecourses. It's our BHA. It's an extraordinary state of affairs. In addition, there are fees, some hidden or at best opaque, of over £5 million per annum that owners fulfill. The oversight and accountability for many of those so-called deductions is just not good enough. Against this backdrop, the exciting ownership project, more of which we'll hear about later, has taken almost 3 years to get the go-ahead, with a very modest funding request. A focused recruit and retain program for your biggest investor is surely the most obvious strategic mission, yet it has taken too long to get to the position where we are good to go. How many owners have we lost along the way? In the meantime, we have heard the welcome news of a rise in racecourse attendances, which has been attributed in no small part to the national campaign, The Going is Good, which has cost over £3 million of levy money, with the purpose of delivering a campaign on the back of the significant outputs of Project Beacon. These are all positive steps, but there has to be a realisation across the industry that it must invest in its key audience, and as a sport we cannot just rely upon owners turning up, paying up, without investing in that proposition. The levy funding of the national campaign was obviously very welcome. It is, however, hard to explain the industry's lack of investment in the retention and recruitment of owners, whilst continuing to support and promote racecourse-based initiatives. It will be no surprise for you to know that the prize money levels were at the top of the survey feedback tables. There are two main issues on the table. Firstly, we have to grow the total prize money pot. Arguing over who gets what, whilst ignoring the bigger picture, will result in decline. Headwinds around betting tax, affordability, will obviously impact P&Ls. We therefore need to get projects like PACE or a version of it going forward, and we need to do it quickly. Secondly, we finally need proper commercial agreements with the racecourses, where we can work together to help grow the top line and ensure all owners receive increased returns. The ROA will continue to work with the Thoroughbred Group, of which it's a member, to secure these agreements. However, there is no more time for delay, and if owners have to make their own deals, then this is an area we must explore. Turning to the financial results for 2025, excluding the exceptional item, the association recorded a small surplus. After a few very difficult years, this was a welcome turnaround. It is now vital that we build on the improvement to restore the balance sheet, Registered owner numbers at the BHA continue to decline, which has a knock-on effect on the ROA financial model as it stands. The advantages of the ROA membership far outweigh the cost, and the elevated experience it offers should be utilised by all owners in British racing. We will continue to drive that message as part of the ROA communications. We are, however, intrinsically linked to the overall health of ownership recruitment. We shall shortly be launching the associate membership tier, which will provide a pathway into the ROA membership for syndicate and club members in order to enhance their ownership engagement further and ensure they feel part of the racing community. While recent years have depressed retained reserves, the balance sheet remains robust in terms of the business as usual workload. Current trading is ahead of budget and well ahead of the previous year. Continued emphasis on cost management whilst improving and enhancing the income line remains the strategy for the coming months. I would like to express my thanks to Louise and her team, who have done a sterling job over the last 12 months. The team at the ROA continue to represent owners' views, ensuring that your voice is heard across all parts of the industry and on behalf of all owners, regardless of their level of investment and involvement. This will continue to be the focus for the new cross-industry strategic focus group, Owner Relations and the ROA. British racing is facing well-known and documented challenges. However, we do have an opportunity to secure the sport for the future if we can deliver a product that is rewarding for our existing audiences, investable for a new audience, and create a governance environment that allows clear decision-making and positive action. Good luck to Jim, who takes over from me today. I'm sure he will do a superb job and will receive full support from the new board going forward. Finally, I look forward to seeing many of you at the ROA Awards on the 4th of December at the Royal Lancaster Hotel in London to celebrate the horses that have lit up the track this year, including a certain Cicero's Gift, who is nominated in 2 categories, you'll be pleased to hear. Now I'd like to hand over to Louise, who's going to tackle some discussion points and Q&As. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. That's great. So now we'll address some key questions that we've received building into the AGM around the themes, and also we'll open the floor to take some questions from in the room as well. So the first question directed to our incoming chair, Jim Walker. With the conclusion of the formal proceedings of the AGM, Jim, and your appointment as our new ROA chair, it would be great to hear from you about your view of the future of the ROA and the key focuses to be tackled as you step into your first ROA board meeting in December.
Thanks, Louise. I think everybody can hear me okay with the microphone. Yes, good. This is very unusual for me because my whole working life has really been getting up in platforms and telling people about what I think is going to happen in the future, especially in Asian economies, which I'm much better at than perhaps horse racing. But I just want to start off with a comment about the future, because I don't think racing knows what it's facing at the moment. And I think that means that we've either got to get together or we're finished as an industry. Because what racing now faces is, in 4 weeks' time, a budget which might ensure a significant reduction in prize money over the coming years if taxes are harmonised at a high level. And at the same time, we're facing, I'm afraid, a critical depletion of resources at governmental levels, not just in the UK, but across the Western world. Because governments over the decades have promised time and again to pay pensions that they can't afford, to increase social security payments and social welfare payments that they can't afford, and that we can't afford. So what they'll be trying to do in future is reduce as much as they can the amounts that they pay to things that they think are peripheral. I'm afraid horse racing, in their view, is peripheral. It's expendable, and it can be dumped at any time. That's the future. What can we do about the present and where we stand just now? Everybody talks about prize money. That's what I had in my election leaflet or election statement 2 years ago. Stepping onto the board, I thought, oh, well, this is dead easy. We can start pushing for prize money. And I am still asking Charlie what some of the acronyms mean in horse racing today. I cannot get my head around the governance structure of this industry. If anybody can get their head around the governance structure of this industry, then all they're doing is looking at it day after day after day and spending no time sleeping, because it is so ridiculous that it's beyond belief. As Charlie said a few seconds ago about prize money and our association with the Thoroughbred Group, that's been like trying to build a wall without any concrete. Because everything that owners try to do gets objected to somewhere in the Thoroughbred Group, even though owners pay for everybody else on the Thoroughbred Group. You know, I'm an economist, Charlie's an accountant. Accountants are very good at being careful with what goes into profit and loss accounts and balance sheets and the like. Economists are usually very good at being on the one hand and on the other hand. When I was invited to join the company that I worked for 16 years in Hong Kong, the chief executive of the company said to the rest of the appointment committee, the reason I'm asking you to accept Jim Walker is because he's the only one-handed economist that I've ever interviewed. So you're going to get it straight from me, I'm afraid, even when you don't like it. And here's the notice: the Thoroughbred Group better put up or shut up if they cannot deliver on project pace and other elements of the industry to get prize money up. And as Charlie says, if that means that we've got to go and negotiate as racehorse owners with racecourses, that's what we're going to do. Prize money is the biggest issue for owners. But, you know, let me tell you that over the last 2 years, I've been astonished at how much goes on underneath the surface in terms of costs. And again, I can't get my head around all the costs that we face every week with entry fees. It's not just entry fees, there's lots of costs on top of entry fees, with jockey fees, and with all the other elements of the cost structure that we as owners have to face. So Ken McGarrity is sitting in the audience today, and Alan Spence is sitting beside me, and Mark Albon isn't here, but he was a member of the board for at least a year, of which I joined. These three guys have done more to reduce your costs than you can possibly imagine. Their negotiations with the jockeys, which was not easy, by the way, in trying to reduce the costs of the Professional Riders Insurance Scheme, which was way, way overfunded, is going to save owners £3 million this year. You might not realise it, but what these guys did was reduce the PRIS fee from 13% to 1%. Now, that's only for 1 year, and it's going to be renegotiated in 2026, and it'll probably go back up again, but hopefully not to 13%. But that is a £3 million cost saving to owners. Think about that in terms of prize money, which is, what, £120 million a year? A bit more than that. But it's a significant percentage. Costs mean something, and we will continue to try and do our best for owners in terms of reducing costs in the industry. And finally, I want to say something about experience. Not that I know very much about it, and I'm quite sure that Louise is going to say a lot more, and Kate, I think, is going to talk to us in a minute. But the fact is that for those of us that are much more interested in prize money, the experience of the race day doesn't mean that much. I was a member of the Hong Kong Jockey Club, and it was always a bit of a surprise to me coming to race meetings in the UK and getting a free lunch. Because in Hong Kong, you pay for your lunch as an owner, and you pay for your table as an owner at every meeting. You get in for nothing, but of course the entry fee for ordinary people is $10, which is £1. But the fact is, there is no such thing as a free lunch. When we get a free lunch at racecourses, that means prize money goes down. So you have to make the choice. You've got to have an experience, and it's a good experience for a lot of people who don't have good horses. And that's fine. But we need to be aware that we're paying for it, and we're paying for it through prize money. The racecourses won't tell you how much they're charging for that owner's experience. We need to try and find out, and that's one of the things that I'll be trying to do while we continue to improve the racecourse experience for owners. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Jim. Thanks. So I've also had a couple of questions from Mark Olban, who was previously one of our ROA board members. And I think it relates also to some of the media expressions across the relevance of the ROA, but also who are our membership. One of the questions he posed were, of our ROA members, how many are registered owners and non-registered owners? So I thought it was a perfect opportunity to address this today. So from an ROA perspective, all of our members, and that's 100% of our members, are contributing to or investing in British racing through racehorse ownership, whether that's individually, whether that's syndicates, through partnerships, company. So that's something I do need to stress on that side of it. The part at the moment, we do have a split. 80% of our members are registered owners and 20% are classified as non-registered owners. And they're simply terms that are defined by the BHA. The registered owners are liable under the rules of racing, and the 20% non-registered owners are not liable under the rules of racing. It does not constitute their investment or contribution to British racing. Many of those non-registered owners that are members with us, when you add up and we start to, and Kate will expand on this later, we start to look at their insights and profiles of their investment, their cumulative percentage ownership is often 1+ horses in training. They just aren't liable under the rules of racing. So I thought this was the perfect opportunity to try and clarify some of that aspect. So 100% of our owners are supporting racehorse ownership in British racing. The other question that came to light is, of our owners, how many of our members are top owners? How do we represent those top owners? And I'm not going to go into data protected information, but I just want to add from our point of view as the ROA and raising the voice, we are here for all owners, but to categorise tier 1 owners as a cumulative percentage ownership with 11+ horses, 90% of those tier 1 owners are ROA members. But that's just something I wanted to put on the table as part of this AGM to clarify it. The other area of engagement that we've touched on across the board is around our owner survey. We undertook an owner survey earlier in the year. We do have the results. It is informing the decisions, and we will be making those public by the year end. The area that I want to ensure is that when we make those insights public, that they are attached with actions and conditions that we can deliver against, because all we will be telling you are the same frustrations that owners have been hearing year in, year out. And now it's about delivering the actions and the work to go against that. So they're just the bits I wanted to add from the outside themes. I'd now like to open the floor to questions. If anybody has a question, if they would like to raise their hand, we have some of the team on hand with microphones. Please. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to understand, looking around the room, and forgive me for saying this, but there's not a lot of young people in the room as such. What is the strategy for encouraging Gen Z into the ownership arena? Who is going to be sitting in this room in another 30 years' time?
No, thank you. That's a fantastic question. And it highlights what you've probably seen across the media as Project Beacon. So Project Beacon has been one of the most significant pieces of work, research around the next generation consumer research that's been done. One of the pillars that has significantly been highlighted in that is de-risk ownership, making ownership accessible for the next generation. Historically, shared ownership has grown over the last 5 to 10 years rapidly, microshare syndicates, and there's been some great storytelling that, with Cameron Sword and a Grand National winner, etc. So we've got some opportunities, Basher Watson and his environment that he operates in. It is shared ownership. So we have, in obviously discussions and obviously co-appointing Dan Abraham to the board, started to look at that shared ownership space and how we are going to categorically go out and engage the next generation. But it means multiple things. We need the industry as Project Beacon, as the national campaign, the promotional activity to be attracting the audience in. We then need to capitalise on that audience and convert them into owners of the future. And there's plenty that we can do in that space. I hope that helps. David?
Yeah, I'm not sure who this question's addressed to, but where do you see the additional funds coming from to increase the prize money?
So I'll go with that. There has to be new investment. We have to open up opportunities. We cannot just keep arguing about what we've got on the table. The work that's been done in projecting a steady state, do nothing, we will suffer a decline. We will lose racecourses, we will lose owners, and we will lose trainers. Livelihoods will be lost. So there has to be initiatives that open up the market, whether it's simply attracting Gen Z and exploiting that area, or going for a more global investment in a repackaged media rights landscape. That there has been a lot of effort put in, but unfortunately to date we haven't seen any output. There is a big opportunity. I am optimistic, but unless the industry comes together and sells itself together, I fear that we will continue the decline. It's incumbent upon the new team at the BHA when they arrive under its new leader to facilitate and coordinate this approach. And it's incumbent upon the rights holders, the racecourses, to cooperate and meaningfully do something different. Otherwise, we are in a sticky situation. Yeah, go.
I just want to kind of add something, and I think it was maybe you, David, that put the question in about the levels of prize money and the cost increases that you'd seen in your training fees. And the fact that prize money was far from keeping up with that, and suggested a 33% increase in prize money would get us back to 2018 levels, and that's right. But here's the issue that we all need to think about as owners. How is that 33% increase, if we could get it, going to be distributed? Because I'll tell you what racecourses will do. They'll put up the value of the Grand National, 33%, the value of all the Grade 1s at Cheltenham, 33%, all the Ascot races that are Group 1s, Group 2s, Group 3s, 33%, and Grade 4 in National Hunt, and Class 5 and Class 6 in flat racing will get nothing. And we as owners really need to get together and say to ourselves, do we want Class 5 and Class 6 racing? Do we let it die? Do we want Grade 4 racing? Do we let it die in National Hunt? Or are we going to suggest to racecourses, start cutting the prize money for the Grand National? Do you think you'll get any less horses running in it if the prize money was cut 20%? Maybe Dan Skelton would actually win the Trainers' Championship if we could cut the prize money in some of the big National Hunt races and put it in to the core racing, the grassroots racing that is dying on its feet. So it's about distribution of prize money as much as it is about increases in prize money. And that's something that we really need to, as an owners group, get our head around and come up with a strategy.
It has to come from new sources. Betting turnover is reducing. Tax harmonisation, tax hike is going to only put even more pressure on bookmakers. We can't just rely upon the structure that is in place today. I mean, the big media rights wash through has happened, it's there, but you can't see that another type of fundamental change happening. So you've got to seek new investment, repackage, and you've got to market it to the different generations that are sitting in this room, as the chap said over there. So you've got to explore that new investment opportunity, which exists.
Final question.
When the question is asked, where is that additional prize money coming? It's fine to look at new sources, but we should also look at existing sources. And my concern at the moment is that there's been a very influential think tank put recommendations to government, supported by Gordon Brown, former Prime Minister and Chancellor, and 101 MPs. And that proposal was that government should take a lower cut out of the levy and transfer basically 130 million to racing. And racing has been absolutely silent on this issue. And the argument has been, oh, we have to concentrate on not getting harmonisation, and after that we can go and talk about the levy. The problem is that this proposal is being put directly to the Treasury, and racing has sat back and not supported it in any shape or form. And I suspect that many people in this room didn't even know that that is a proposal that has been put. It is not getting the exposure because the media aren't talking about it, and it's not getting exposure because the BHA and all the associations and trade associations of the industry are keeping quiet. Whether that's because they're frightened of the bookmakers, or whether it's because they truly think that harmonisation is the big issue, and I personally don't think there's any chance that racing's tax will be increased. I think online casinos will definitely be increased. But 130 million proposal supported by that sort of group of people is so significant that if racing does not get behind that, how on earth is Treasury going to even consider it properly? And the problem is that if we go back to the levy negotiations that take place between racing and bookmakers, they have historically produced virtually nothing. And they will continue to produce virtually nothing because the bookmakers will not make any serious offer. And DCMS, which is a junior department of government, sits back and expects racing and bookmakers to sort the problem out amongst themselves. And that has never happened in a meaningful way. And DCMS, even if they made a recommendation, would actually then have to go to the Treasury, which barely listens to DCMS, and actually try and get the attention of the Treasury. And at the moment, we have the attention of the Treasury, but
can I maybe ask?
Okay, I think there's a question there.
Maybe ask Philip Davis
could I ask if there is a reason why the ROA has not come out strongly and said we need to support this specific proposal?
You can answer that in a wee second, Charlie. But Philip, would you like to say something about the betting side?
Yeah, well, I will say something. I mean, I should declare I am the chairman of a betting company, so people might want to take that into account. I would say to Peter that if only it were that simple, and I would say that you're playing a slightly dangerous game because you're aligning yourself with think tanks who don't support horse racing. They're anti-gambling campaigners who have already said in the past that they do not see why horse racing should get a subsidy from a levy, that it's outrageous that the government presides over rich racehorse owners getting a subsidy. And to be aligning yourself with people like that, I think you're playing a very dangerous game, because once that particular crocodile has eaten everyone else up, it'll come back and try and eat racing up, and I would beware who you keep company with. The second thing I would say about it is that this idea that horse racing can survive on its own little island, on an oasis, is naive in the extreme. And I'll give you an illustration that people in racing who are campaigning for higher taxes for things like machines and all the rest of it. If there is a sizable increase in, for example, in the tax on machines, it will make virtually every betting office in the UK unviable. Every single one of those betting offices pays tens of thousands of pounds in media rights to British horse racing, totaling certainly well over £100 million in money that goes into horse racing. So your £130 million from cutting the tax on horse racing will have already gone because of the number of reduction in betting shops that pay over that in terms of media rights to SIS and Turf TV. So if only it were that simple. It isn't that simple. Horse racing relies on bookmaker profits. And the thing I would say is this, is that bookmakers hand over to horse racing every year something in the region of £350 million a year. Prize money is somewhere in the region of £150 million a year. The question has to be asked, where is the £350 million a year going before you start saying that there should be even more? The thing is, if you said to somebody in the street, what proportion of prize money should bookmakers say? Some might say half, some might say 100%. All of the prize money should be paid for by bookmakers. I don't think many people would say over double the prize money should be paid for by bookmakers. And that's what's happening at the moment. So all I would say, Peter, is that, yes, bookmakers make a big contribution to horse racing, not as big as owners, but a big contribution. Questions might be asked as to where that money goes. I don't fully know where all that money goes. I think bookmakers would like to know where all that money goes, as well as owners. But what I would say is aligning yourself with people who want to increase taxes on other forms of gambling is a dangerous game for horse racing to play, because those campaigners don't like horse racing. They've just realised that they'll come for you last, that's all. And by undermining bookmakers' income, betting shop income, for example, you will find that horse racing has less money on the back of it. So I don't accept that it's as simple as you portray. I think it's more complicated than that. And I think it's a very, very dangerous game to play.
So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today and confirm that the 2025 Racehorse Owners Association annual general meeting is now concluded. I'd also like to invite you to remain. We have racing this afternoon. We will have some lunch, so please do stay. The board and the team will be in situ, so we can carry on our conversations and discussions, and please do ask any questions that you may have. But I would now like to hand over to Mike Goodfellow, who is going to introduce the industry speakers. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. You've begun talking about and hearing from your new president about all the challenges facing the industry at the present time. This part of the programme has been designed, in a sense, to give you the opportunity to hear from and engage with some of the key representatives from other sectors of the industry. The way it's been put together is on the basis that we have a very short period of time. You'll all be ready for lunch and racing. So we are on a limited time scale. So our thinking has been that what we will do is present you with a number of short inputs from different key speakers. They've each been asked to speak for no more than 10 minutes. And I am a ruthless chairman, and I will get rude if they exceed the 10 minutes. But the thinking again is that if we stick to that time, there should be a little bit of time at the end if you want to raise any questions openly with them. But the idea is that as we move into more informal discussions over lunch, if you have issues and questions you want to put to them, then they're all staying for lunch, and hopefully for some of the racing this afternoon, you will have your chance to follow up with them individually. They've all been given a brief, and the brief was to provide one slide to take 10 minutes to say something about the organisation that they are involved with, the sector that they represent. It may sound a simple and daft question to ask, but sometimes there are misconceptions in terms of who does what and what they're responsible for. Secondly, from their point of view and from where they sit, what is one of the major challenges that their sector and their organisation and the areas they represent, what is one of the major challenges that they face in the context of the industry today? But thirdly, what are the implications of that for yourselves in terms of ownership? That's the brief they were given, and without saying any more, I will introduce our first speaker, who is Richard Wayman, Director of Racing at the BHA.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Sorry. That's right. Just about still morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'm very conscious Mike's going to shut me up in 10 minutes' time, so I'm going to keep to the brief. I should begin by saying it's a great honour to be back at the ROA. I was working at the ROA myself until I think it was 2015 that I left, so it's an organisation that means a lot to me. It does an incredibly important job representing the people that put the most money into the sport. And please be assured that it is extremely influential in terms of impacting on industry decisions. I'm also a racehorse owner. I've been involved in syndicates and partnerships for 25 years or so. And whilst, of course, there are lots of headwinds and challenges with racing, I would say, as an owner, it has given me some of the best days of my life. And I think it's really important that we remember that, it is a fantastic thing, a fantastic experience when a horse that you are owning has those successful days on the track. So I've had a lot of fun days. Back to the day job now. BHA, you'll all know the BHA. It's the sports governing and regulatory body responsible for governance, administration, and regulation of British horse racing. As I think Charlie touched on, a bit of a change going on at the moment with the new chair, Lord Allen, and some of those responsibilities may well extend in the coming years under Lord Allen's leadership. I think it's worth mentioning just a little bit so you're aware of what the BHA does. About 2/3 of the BHA staff, so getting on for almost 200 people, are just people who effectively are on the racecourse every day, effectively running the sport itself. So here at Doncaster today, there'll be 2 or 3 stewards, there'll be an assistant steward, there'll be a couple of starters, there'll be a judge, there'll be a clerk of the scales, there's a handicapper here, there's vets of the BHA here, there's people down at the racecourse stables, policing all of that. So there are big teams of people working on the racecourse on behalf of the BHA, and obviously then there are teams working centrally in all the sorts of areas that we've touched on before, talking to government, looking at the race planning itself, which is my area, welfare work and all of that sort of thing. So big team of people, but quite a big brief that the BHA has to deal with. As Director of Racing, I decided I'd focus on a racing matter. The fixture list always raises temperatures. I'm sure everyone in the room will have a view. But really, what are we trying to achieve with the fixture list? And just talk a little bit about some of the changes that we've made and some of the recent current trends. So the first thing that's important, and in response to some of the questions that have been raised today, I think the sport's future depends on a lot of things, including the ability to open up new markets and to attract funding from overseas. But it also really depends on appealing to customers within Britain as well. And within that, I'm talking about people who bet on the sport, people who go and watch it. And of course, the fixture list is a key part of that. It's how we present racing to those customers. Of course, as owners, it's also important that the fixture list provides the opportunities for your horses that you want. And that's another key consideration. So when putting the fixture list together every year, it's something that we're trying to balance a lot of different interests, which are often to some extent conflicting. Now, the ROA has a key role in it. Stephen Appleby, who sits at the end of the table here, is your member on the racing committee that works on the fixture list every year with a number of other organisations. So again, just to stress that your organisation is feeding into the way that policy is shaped. So I was just going to really touch on three things that's going on with the fixture list at the moment. And the first is that what we're seeing is something that we're seeing in a lot of other sports as well. The really big flagship elite events are growing in popularity. People want to go to them. They'll spend a lot of money to go to them. Everything else is under a lot of pressure. So if I look at something like betting, and just to give you a flavour of what's going on with the betting markets, at the moment, we would be seeing betting fall from year to year on British racing by about 4 or 5% as a sort of rough area of level of decline. When you split that between the very best fixtures, the top 150 or so fixtures, and everything else, the top 150 fixtures, the betting's actually increasing. It's going up by about 2% a fixture, whereas when you look at the smaller and the sort of what I'd call the run of the mill fixtures, you're looking at declines there of sort of 8 or 9%. So it's quite a contrasting performance. Similarly, if you look at crowds actually this year are going up everywhere, but they're going up by more in percentage terms at those big events than they are at the run-of-the-mill stuff. And even when we think about horses and how you are running your horses, what we see this year is that field sizes at the big events, at those premier fixtures, those big headline of events, the fixtures, the field sizes are for anything going up, certainly on the flat. Whereas on the run-of-the-mill fixtures, field sizes are under pressure. So we have a picture there of, as with other sports, the big stuff getting bigger and everything else under a bit of pressure. And I think our challenge as a sport is firstly to lean into the fact that customers want to go to those big events, that we have events in British racing that the rest of the world would die for. And we have to really cherish and make best use of that. But we also have to make sure that the benefits of that work through the entire fixture list. So whether you have a horse who's racing at those big events, or whether it's racing in a class 5 or class 6 somewhere, that the whole sport benefits as a result of growing that general interest. Competitive and interesting racing. If I asked in this room, what do people think about the volume of racing we stage? I suspect most people would think we stage too much racing. Of course, there is a reason we stage as much racing as we do. We've talked this morning about levy, we've talked about media rights. All of those races that we stage create money and help to put into the prize money the sort of things that we've been talking about. But we're also very conscious that if you stretch the horse population too thinly, then in the longer term, you will begin to lose the interest of your customers. What we've seen since COVID is the horse population is contracting by about 1.5% a year, pretty consistently year on year. And we're going to have to consider as a sport how we balance those conflicting challenges of wanting to drive revenues, drive levy, drive media rights, but at the same time ensure that our racing is competitive enough. And finally, just talking about the programme. Again, I know, and when I talk about the programme, I mean the schedule of races that we put on. Again, lots of things that we're trying to balance there, including making sure that the racing is competitive and interesting for the racegoer and for the punter, but also to think about ensuring that your horses have opportunities to run where you would like them to run, where we possibly can. And of course, part of that is ensuring that the programme gives horses the chance to develop their potential. So it's not all about field sizes and competitiveness. We also have to recognise that as a sport, we need to make sure that we give our horses that chance to develop. So through this season, for example, over the winter, with the novice chase program, you'll see a lot more novice chases, weight for age novice chases. Some of them will only have 2, 3, 4 runners in, particularly when the ground's not what we'd like it to be. But we see that as an investment in the future and giving young horses the chance to develop their potential and to get to the very highest level that they possibly can. So what does all that mean for ROA members? Well, of course, none of this stuff happens if people aren't prepared to own racehorses in Britain. The fixture list can only exist as long as all of you in this room are still prepared to invest in horses and to support it. And so what I would be saying and asking all of you is first of all, to be assured that we recognise the importance of your expenditure on racehorses. We recognise it costs a lot of money to own a racehorse, and your support for the sport is never taken for granted. We realise that more can be done, and what I'd encourage everybody in the room to do is to feed back to the likes of the ROA and indeed to others to give your views on how things could be done better from your experience, and whether for some people that's simply about prize money, for others it's about the customer experience. All of that insight is important as we try to both protect and indeed grow ownership in the future. So with that, I shall shut up because I know Mike's already beginning to look at me, and that must mean we're getting close. So thank you all very much for your time today.
Thank you, Richard. Spot on. So move on to our next key speaker, Alan Del Monte, Chief Executive of the Levy Board. Alan.
So starting with the basics, what is the levy? The levy is 10% of bookmakers' profits derived from British racing, and that is the Levy Board collects 10% of the money that a bookmaker makes at the end of the year just from British racing and just from customers based in Britain. It doesn't include money from non-British racing, and it doesn't include money bet by punters outside Britain. The rate of the levy is set by government. It is not set by the Levy Board, and it's not set by Racing and Betting, although, as has been mentioned, the government is always very keen to see racing and betting working together to try to agree the rate. But ultimately, it's a decision for the government. The Levy Board is a public body. It may not seem like the levy is public money in the way that taxation is public money, but that is how it is classed. And that brings with it responsibilities on the Levy Board to have very transparent processes. We are under a high degree of scrutiny from the National Audit Office, Parliament's appointed auditors that are also the Levy Board's auditors. And that means that there is an expectation that we will have very clear and explicable processes around how we collect the money and how we spend the money. Now, while that can sometimes mean some frustration with grant applicants to us, that it looks like that we are asking a lot of questions, it's necessary to ask the questions because that's what comes with distributing public money. The upside of that for racing is that the Levy Board's ability to explain to racing what we're doing with the money is aided by being very transparent. So every penny that the Levy Board receives is available to be spent, and what we do with that money is set out down to the pound in our annual report. So there is no difficulty about seeing through the mechanism where the funding is coming from and what is happening to it. We do expect then that racing will come to us with very good applications that are very clear about what the objectives are, how they'll be measured, and at the end, whether things have worked or not. And that's the price of having public money distributed under this mechanism. The board takes the view that it wants to be a broad funder throughout the sport. It doesn't just want to be a provider of prize money. It actively wants to be involved in using the levy for a range of activities through the sport. We provide about 40% of total prize money, which I'll come on to in a moment, about 80% of the sport's regulation and integrity costs, and a whole series of other things ranging from horse welfare to people activity, including much of the training of staff at the racing schools, a whole series of veterinary science, welfare and education projects, and marketing and promotion projects. As you've heard, the most of the money came from us for the national campaign run by Great British Racing. And we also like to be at the start of innovative things like, for example, Champions for Gallop, and then ideally would like the sport to take on those things after seed funding from the levy. Now, what are the risks? You've heard that betting turnover has fallen. It's down by about 22% in the last 3 years for a number of reasons. One of those is around the risk-based checks that bookmakers are applying. There are other so-called affordability checks. There are other financial checks around source of funds. And bookmakers have faced and continue to face an increase in their charges for media rights. The accumulation of this has been an increase in margin, as in how much is retained by the betting operators. That is feeding in to falling turnover, and also an increase, or at least a maintenance of, and then recently an increase in profit, which has led to an increase in levy. So the levy has risen in the last 4 years. It was 109 million in the last year, having been 105 the year before, 100 before that, and 97 before that. One of the concerns clearly that we have is that in an environment where turnover is falling, how long can it continue to go up? It is one of the reasons that we are being cautious and keeping above our normal amounts of cash in reserve in case the levels of funding that we are currently spending are not sustainable for the medium term. It is easy then to overlook that there is a recent good news story in terms of prize money. Levy board contribution to prize money was 66 million in 2023. It's going to be about 17% higher than that in 2026, up to 77 million. But as I say, it's a question about sustainability. That's really what motivates us. And of course, as been mentioned, we have the autumn statement on the 26th of November, and we will see what outcome that has and is projected to have when we know the results. But as I finish here by saying, whether it's good times or bad, there is a question about where to put the money. And as far as prize money is concerned, it would be very welcome to have a clear strategy and a direction about where the sport, and particularly owners, because it's principally money going back to owners, where owners would like the levy to put its prize money, but the sport generally. That would be a very helpful and clear long-term thing for us to have in front of us. And three things, if I could finish. One is that question around prize money. We've seen the priority for 2026 being in the development races area and getting that and top and middle tier internationally competitive. It would be very useful to know what the next stage immediately after that is. Is there a second priority now that that's been done? The second point is around grant applications generally. It's very important that aspiration and ambition is in the applications that come to us, but they have to be matched with the ability to execute. There is no point in us providing funding for things that have a good idea but don't have the engine to succeed. And the third thing, particularly about Project Beacon, which we've heard a lot about today, the Levy Board has provided all of the money for Project Beacon. We do not want that to be another report that gathers dust on a shelf. So anything that can be put in place to ensure that report is turned into action, we'd be fully supportive of. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. The next two foci we're going to look at are, first of all, around horse welfare, and then secondly, moving on to people welfare. to give you a highlight and introduction into current issues around the horse welfare agenda, introduce Pip Kirkby, who's project lead with the Horse Welfare Board.
Thanks, Mike. And good afternoon, everybody. As Mike says, I'm with the Horse Welfare Board, and as Richard was also with the ROA for some time, so it's nice to be back. Thank you. So first of all, what's the role of our organisation in the delivery of British racing? Well, in short, we provide strategic leadership, coordination and accountability for horse welfare. And we aim to ensure that the welfare of the horse is considered in all decision-making across the industry. We are independently chaired, and there's been a recent review of the Horse Welfare Board. And as a result, the balance has shifted. We now have 3 independent members, with the rest made up with representation from industry stakeholders. Our main focus, we develop and implement the industry's horse welfare strategy. We do that by bringing together all key stakeholders within the sport. That includes whether it's the BHA, yourselves, trainers, breeders, ROR, rehoming organisations, with the aim to produce and provide consistent welfare and safety standards across the horse's life, whether that's before, during and after its career. We also promote transparency and trust by communicating our progress. We're accountable via Horsepower, which was developed to promote the safety and welfare initiatives of the sport and the industry. And through that, and multiple channels, including via the ROA with a feature in this month's Owner Breeder. We're funded by the Racing Foundation, as Alan said, by the Levy Board, supporting a wide range of projects. The key being the 26 projects that were identified in A Life Well Lived, which is the current horse welfare strategy for the sport. And next year, we'll see the development and evolution of the next iteration of that strategy, again, in consultation with the stakeholders. Our major challenge in the context of equine welfare is the increasing scrutiny that the sport is under from a public perception perspective. There are concerns in relation to the safety and the welfare of our horses, and that's both during and after their racing careers. Project Beacon has been spoken about a lot during today, and this provides key evidence that there are issues and concerns amongst the public in relation to the equine safety and welfare of the horses within racing and the use of horses across wider sport. It's only through effective communication and the effective delivery of our equine welfare strategy that we can actually support and move with the changing public perceptions and keep the sport thriving. In terms of what this means for you, the challenge that public perception poses for members of the ROA is twofold. There are reputational and practical implementation. First of all, I would say that your visible commitment to the welfare of the horses, again, with that focus through racing and then through into retirement, is hugely important. How the public perceives the welfare of the horses has direct impact on the social license associated with ownership and the broader sport, as well as the ongoing political support for the sport that we see. There's also the obvious financial risk with a decline in public perception racing for the sport. There's that decline in income streams, and whether that is via attendance, sponsorship and betting, and with a knock-on support for the welfare and safety projects and initiatives that we're driving forward. I have actually, I've cheated a little bit, if I've been allowed to. I have, thanks Mike for letting me put it in. And I'd say that to help us do that, there are two elements to this. First of all, what we would ask of you, we would ask you to wholeheartedly support the industry initiatives via your platforms, via your conversations. Owners are racing's ambassadors, and your words carry weight. And we would also ask you to support your trainers, your jockeys, to support the initiatives as well, where relevant, which filters across multiple projects. In terms of where we can support you, we're very conscious that we need to be providing even further enhanced information provision to you. There are some copies of the Horse Welfare Board infographic, which highlights the work that we've undertaken to date. And we'll be working closely with the ROA to make sure that you're provided with facts, figures, and the key messages about the work that's ongoing. So as I say, you can continue to really build the role of ambassadors for the sport and help us to protect the sport that we all love so much.
Thank you, Pip. You're making my job easy. Thank you. Moving on perhaps to one of the newer teams at the table, but we talk about the importance of horse welfare, but increasingly in recent years there's been an emphasis on the welfare of people welfare within the industry. So John Pett is Programme Director of the Industry People Board, and invite John to come and say a few words.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm newer to the industry, but I'm here representing both the Industry People team. I'll give you a little bit of background to what we do, but also the Horse Racing Industry People Board, a body that's been in existence now for about 2.5 years, set up to design and deliver a strategy, Our People Racing's Future. We do that in partnership with the Industry Programme Group, of which all of the key stakeholders, including the ROA, are part of that. At the key heart of what we're trying to do, essentially, are all of the people who are working with, looking after, caring for, and schooling, training, etc., your investment. All of the workforce at the front line, whether that's trainers through to employees in breeding industry, race courses, etc. So we've got a pretty broad remit. The strategy was launched in February this year. I've been in post now for almost 6 months. After a career in Olympic and Paralympic sport, so hopefully bringing a few fresh ideas to where we're trying to go. But to give you a bit of background, apologies, it's actually a tiny bit smaller than I thought it was. Training and education, critical part of this. We need all of our workforce to be as skilled as possible. Higher skill means better care, better support, better ability to train and develop. So the skills framework is part of this. We've identified what are the skills required for every single role within the industry. What are the role profiles? How can we help to recruit and develop people? But also, what does the education system look like that actually ensures through the training providers, whether they're the racing schools and others, to deliver what we need? Diversity and inclusion. A diverse workforce is a stronger workforce, whether that's commercially or just effectiveness, team cohesion. But we need to have a really clearly diverse, but also inclusive workforce. Gen Z's been mentioned. If we're going to attract future workforce, we have to be diverse. We have to be inclusive. Careers, marketing and recruitment. Clearly, not everyone can stay doing the same thing forever. We need to be recruiting new people into the industry, but also helping people to progress from role to role. That essentially is the Careers in Racing brand. You may well have seen that before. And also a jobs board. So we're at the heart of everything that is in the recruitment space across the industry. Health and well-being, which I'll come on to a little bit shortly, as that's my kind of key area that I'll focus on. Workforce data. We've heard about data previously. Data is something that in a data-rich sport, we are actually quite data poor at the front line in terms of what we're doing and some of the decision-making that we have. So an industry database, insight generation, monitoring effectiveness of all of the programs, that's something we're trying to build moving forward. And modernising employment. A number of people that have been operating within the industry, that are running businesses, that are caring for the workforce, have been doing so for a long time. They aren't necessarily all keeping up with modern practice. What are the modern demands under employment law? What is needed? What creates a really strong team? How can we support everyone as best as possible? So that links into licensing, education, employer quality standards, some of the key kind of pieces we're looking at. But as I mentioned, health and well-being, this is a big focus for the team at the moment, because ultimately caring for the people who are caring for your horses, for your investment, is a critical part of this. We've seen that as an industry, we have an above societal average suicide rate. We have many instances, an increase in mental health cases, physical health or injuries, because it is a risky industry to work in. So we've got to make sure we have the right support around everybody. Clinical governance to ensure that we're investing that in the right way, that we have the right standards. We're looking at enhancing the quality of provision. working with key stakeholders such as racing welfare, the IJF, to ensure that everyone on the front line is getting the right care and support they need. And that extends to everything to drug and alcohol testing, but also more proactive service for everybody. Why important? We want to try and make sure that your investment is as protected as possible. Hopefully that's pretty obvious. But a healthy and happy workforce, there's clear benefits. Consistent care, that's one of the critical parts of this. What is best practice and what is normal? If we can establish that, there's a better chance that wherever your horses may be stabled, whoever is training them, whoever is caring for them, can do so really well. We can also maximise time on task. You probably, hopefully, want the best skilled person working with your horse the maximum amount of time. If they're injured, if they're off work, that creates a challenge. So the more we can ensure that we have the right health and wellbeing strategy, the better we can do there. But also sport reputation. We've heard about social licence from a horse welfare point of view. There's also a question around social licence from a human welfare point of view. So the better we care for everyone that working in our industry, the better chance we have of protecting that social licence and the investment and the reputation of the industry. Thank you.
Thank you, John. So finally, final input brings us right back to yourselves and to the ROA. And here they've cheated a little bit in the sense we have two inputs. Firstly, from Kate Freeman, Head of Ownership, who will then finish by passing the baton back to Louise. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mike said, I'm Kate Freeman. I'm the Head of Ownership at the ROA, and I also lead the Owner Relations team. So we're a new team. We were formed in January of this year as part of the industry strategy work, and we are a strategic partnership between the BHA and the ROA. You may have seen some communications within the Owner Breeder magazine and also ROA and BHA comms channels. As I say, we're a new team, but we've been working behind the scenes, as it were, for 2 years, focused on how to improve the ownership experience and improve retention of British owners within racing. So as it's already been mentioned, owners are a significant investor into British racing. Over £500 million a year is input by owners, which is 40% if you look at the total inflows into British racing. We also know that that owner number is declining, among other metrics like horses in training and the foal crop number, which is now tracking below the EIS prediction. But this is not new. These are not new metrics that are declining. And like I say, our work has been going on for 2 years, looking at how to try and retain that investment. What we identified really quickly, as Charlie's already mentioned, was data. The data is really important. If you don't have a clear line of sight of your key customers, you can't influence retaining them. We have to have a really clear line of sight of the investment levels of all of our owners. The issue we had was the BHA data, the way that it's captured is through horses. So from a regulatory point of view, horse data is captured as a single line of sight. So if you're a sole owner, it's fine. You can have a clear line of sight if a sole owner has 1 or 2 horses. The minute you try to look at partnerships and split investments, it completely kind of blurs your view. So what we've done is we've restructured the data, and we can now have a clear line of sight of the individual investment level of all owners within British racing. So that's really important in terms of how we then try to influence that number. So since the work started, we've also been able to restructure the information, like I said, and it's also important to say the data we've looked at excludes syndicate members. So we're not actually able to see that information currently, as that line of data is really hard to see. The owner survey that Louise mentioned earlier was really important in terms of we actually got a clear view of what owners were thinking and how they were feeling within racing. It's very much the focus of owner relations to try and impact that number and that owner experience. Clearly, on course is the big priority in terms of looking at what we can try and influence with the owner experience. And now we've got that individual line of sight data, we can now start to send that to racecourses. We have a data sharing agreement, and we can start to share that information with the racecourses. When working with the service providers, they've been really keen to try and support this. the racecourse is absolutely getting after the racecourse experience. It's really important to attack this area. When we look at the owner's survey, one of the big areas of feedback from ownership is to enjoy watching horses come and run at the racecourse. So it's really an area we need to focus on. So this is just a short summary. Louise and I have split our session today. I'll wrap up now and hand over to her. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. So I've now been in situ for over 12 months at the ROA, and it's been a full-on fly by the seat of your pants kind of time. It's been exciting. I did actually know most of the acronyms in racing coming into this, so I had a head start, I felt. But I'm hoping what today is bringing together is that across British racing, the owner's fundamental importance that everybody is recognising, collaborating towards, is essential for the ongoing future. What the ROA's role to play in that is significant. It has to be the voice of racehorse owners. But what we have touched on time and time again today, and we are getting closer and pushing the barrier in this space, is the data. Not every owner wants to hear the politics around British racing. Not every owner wants to just focus on one level of experience. So we have to critically understand who our key customer is, and not only how we communicate with them, how we engage with them, how we represent them. We're already starting to do that through a tiered ownership structure. Those that are really focused on the governance, the prize money, the costs. But there are a significant level of owners in British racing that just want to have fun. They want to go racing and they want to have an amazing experience. So we as the ROA have to work on that. It's a very tricky role to play, and we have to unlock the ability with our data to understand that audience and how we communicate, but how we actively listen. But it is a challenging role because all owners want something different. So how do we utilise the insights to lobby and challenge the high level pressures at prize money and costs? How do we influence them? And I can assure you we are. We have challenges. We've worked with the BHA. We had the streamlined ownership costs that were delayed because of tech activity. We worked with the BHA. We challenged that pressure. They're now in situ, which is a great piece of work for the owners from that perspective. We've also looked at the other challenges around banking onboarding. We then got in touch on behalf of those owners where there was a high level of frustration, and we challenged the status quo. We drove that position forward. So we are doing so much that maybe doesn't get understood, or it isn't relevant to the audience that's reading that part. But across owners, we are making the voice of owners stronger, more relevant, and directed at the areas that need change to be driven. Kate touched on some of the work with the owner relations activity. Now, one of those critical areas enabled the data that everybody sees or doesn't see necessarily, that passes between the point your horse is declared to run and the race course. And we took the handcuffs off for the racecourse because everybody was saying, well, I never hear anything. I press a button. Nobody tells me how I can go, what's happening. We unlocked a really simple piece of data sharing between the racecourses and the BHA. And we opened up the ability for now, owners' contact details can be shared. It's not a breach, it's legitimate interest. I'm running my horse at Doncaster today. I want Doncaster to contact me. I want the racecourse to speak to me. Owners are now getting going updates. They're getting engagement, offers of extra benefits when they arrive on course. These are simple things, but this is what the voice of owner does. But we have to reach across. We've got the serious subjects, but we've also got an audience that wants a fun and amazing experience for what they put in. So there's a multiple role to play, and with the strong and strength of the board coming in and supporting the executive team and the team that works on this, it's a really exciting time for the future, and I'm really looking forward to driving the challenge forward. We also improving the owner's experience. We have our accreditation scheme. We've got our gold standard going. We're now working closer than ever with the Racehorse Syndicate Association about what does shared ownership look like? Why don't we have a tiered ownership experience? Why don't we make ownership aspirational from your entry level through microshare still an amazing experience, to investing more and more in keeping that audience coming. The next generation converting some of the Invades initiatives, some of the next generation syndicates into more relationship with ownership. How do we convert those? And that's all about experiences. That's all about working collaboratively. And that builds on our community. One of the biggest parts from an owner's perspective in the survey was that over 67% didn't feel recognised by the sport, by the industry. They didn't feel that they were engaged. It wasn't an emotional connection, it was a transactional connection. These are all things that we at the ROA can challenge and change, but we have to work together. We can't do this in isolation, and that's part of the owner's work stream, directly inputting through the commercial committee and the industry strategic framework. And it's all about protecting and promoting, and that's where we get to these high levels. As we said, we've got significant headwinds coming down the line, but the insights that we are gleaning and we are obtaining are informing those industry tables. It is a collective view that we're bringing, but we won't be afraid as the ROA to call out when we need to move things on faster and we need to make change, because we can see where the forecast of ownership is heading. From that. But I just wanted to give you a summary. So a lot is happening, a lot is going on, but we are front foot in driving change. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. We do have a short period of time now before lunch. I presume roving mics are still out and about. So your chance to follow up, question, comment on anything you've heard from any of the inputs from our speakers this morning. Anybody want to start the? Yes, over here.
Thank you. I'd like to know the reasoning behind the BHA changing the rules, whereas only horses over class 4 can go into the handicaps £2 over or enter them. Because I don't understand it, and it's actually stopped one of my horses running quite a lot this year.
But what we used to do was allow horses to run effectively £2 over the maximum weight, and we stopped doing that for one reason only, really, at that class 5 and 6 level. What we found horses doing, so let's say you own a horse that's rated 66. Before that rule came in years ago, you'd have had to run in races 0 to 70s, 0 to 75s. What, obviously, as a result of that rule used to let you do, you could drop down into a 0 to 65, easier race to win. Now, the problem with that is that if all owners are doing that, what that's encouraging owners to do and trainers to do is to keep running their horses in lower and lower class races, because you always want to be at the top of the rating band. And racecourses, it's cheaper for them to put a race on like that. So what the combined effect of owners wanting to drop their horses and racecourses wanting to put on cheaper horses was basically, it was pushing the program further and further down. So we had to make a change. We appreciate it frustrates racehorse owners, because at the end of the day, all you want to do is win a race with your horse. Well, there should still be plenty of races for you to run at that level. But I appreciate that taking that away has slightly restricted it. But there was a good reason that we did it. We can't just let the program keep drifting further and further down, because we do need to maintain, some quality in British racing.
Yeah, 2 questions, please. Who actually decides how the prize money is distributed? And secondly, we've heard a lot about Project Beacon. Can someone explain what it is and how it's going to help racehorse owners?
Thank you. I think there are probably 2 parts to your question. We work with Richard and others at BHA and the industry through the year on the prize money proposals that will be coming to us once a year. What we're looking for is a very clear rationale for what the priorities are for one year to the next. It does change quite a bit. We don't have a history of setting a very clear set of targets or priorities and then sticking to those for a period of time, which is something I mentioned earlier we'd quite like to see. So the levy board's decision in the end is whether to agree with or not agree with the final position that has come through the BHA board principally, which is now the the body for racing that takes the decisions. There are individual decisions during the year where the levy board might get involved, but what we're really looking for is a longer term plan for racing and something that we can sign up to. How then racing formulates those plans, probably you're better placed than I am to answer.
Thanks, Alan. I mean, prize money this year will actually be about 195 million. That's the sort of number it has. It is. The levy board will contribute about 70 of that. So that's the amount out of that 195 that is centrally controlled. The vast majority of the rest of that money comes from the racecourses through their media rights and their attendances, and they have much more discretion about where to put that money. Now, there are minimum values, so whenever a race is staged, a racecourse has to make sure it meets those minimum values. But ultimately, if a racecourse has got £1 million to spend on their prize money through the course of a year, they can distribute that across their fixture list pretty much how they like, but obviously meeting those minimum values. So where racing spends, where centrally we spend more of our time is talking about how we use that central support that the levy board provide. And that's a really difficult discussion because I think all of us think there's not any part of the programme from class 1 really to class 6 where there's too much money. You know, that there is a lack of money within the sport. So the discussion is in that situation where you have a lack of resources at all levels. Where do you best place it? And it's a balance. It's a balance that we have to strike, recognizing that the top of the sport, horses are competing internationally. That's what's on ITV. That has to be strong. Recognizing at the bottom of the sport, it still costs £25,000, £30,000 a year to have a horse, and you're running for low returns. So it's basically a debate that the sport has to ultimately decide how best to spread that. And as with all of these things, it's a balance, and people will have different views how to make how that balance best looks. But we're fundamentally trying to spread scarce resources across an entire program. So I do go on, keep going. Do you want
It's the BHA that decides, is that right?
No. So the BHA board ultimately decides, but basically the commercial committee and supporting committees on which all of the major bodies, including the ROA, are represented, have those discussions. You try to get to a position where all the parties agree. Generally, we do. When we don't, the BHA, the ultimate arbiter. Then, having done that, that BHA would make the recommendation to the levy board, who would either support it or they wouldn't. But your organisation, the ROA, is in the middle of those discussions. And as we've touched on earlier, it's difficult for the ROA because, you know, as with the sport, you're representing all owners, from those at the very top to those running horses, you know, in the lowest grade races. So that is a challenge.
Could someone just volunteer to say a word about the Beacon project, please?
So Project Beacon was an industry initiative funded by Alan's body to do a deep dive into who our customers are, who they aren't, what are the barriers to engagement with the sport, to look at different media engagements and platforms. It was a working group that was cross-industry populated, and they used Saatchi's to help produce the report. It's a very, very good. It's the best analysis that I've seen in my time. It identifies barriers to entry, especially from the younger generations, centered around equine welfare, which we touched on. And it provides terrific insights as to how we engage with the next generation. The fear, as Alan mentioned, and I think I did, is that it isn't acted upon and it's not utilized. However, the BHA changes in terms of its commercialization and the introduction of more commercial initiatives. It will provide a fantastic platform to hopefully engage and grow the industry.
Thank you, Charlie, for that. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all our speakers for giving us their time this morning and for keeping to time. And hopefully you found that useful. Thank you. I'll now just park you back to Louise for the final word. Thank you.
So thank you very much all for coming today. Thank you to my board for being here and representing our owners. Thank you to the owners in the room for joining us. A special thanks to the industry speakers for giving us an overview of all those critical areas that sometimes are behind smoke and mirrors and not understood. So a bit of clarity brings it to life. And thank you from myself and my team. And please do pose those challenging questions. I know it's a good time to do it. Thank you.